Hey, welcome everyone. Thanks for watching 20 Sides of Every Story. This is the first of what I'm hoping will be a monthly program. Last night we played Dreamchaser.
It was awesome.
Yes. And kind of the format of what I'm hoping that we will do in the future is we're going to play something like this, either a small press tabletop RPG or an indie, independently published RPG. And we'll discuss like an element or something unique about it, maybe more in the abstract, and then also a little bit maybe about the experience that we had. And then try to get the people behind the games on so that we can ask them some questions, pick their brain, talk to them a little bit about what intrigued us about their game. Yeah, this game, so the theme, I thought player agency would be a good thing to talk about. And after having played it, maybe you can see why, right?
Yeah, for sure.
What did you think of our Dream Chaser game last night?
Well, I thought the game was way better than I expected. You know, kind of coming into it, you think, okay, what are four knuckleheads really going to come up with, and is it going to be enjoyable? You know, Alex being a GM and a DM in a lot of the games, like I've always enjoyed hearing your stories, right? And I've enjoyed going through those, and I was like, well, I'm not that creative. I can't come up with this stuff. But getting into it, it just starts in such a way that you kind of think big, and then you start to kind of narrow it down. And as you were explaining it to us before the stream, that really helped me phrase it, that it's like, okay, don't worry about the details yet. They'll kind of come along the way. And I think that helps a lot, because otherwise, if you're trying to think of these specifics with no other frame of reference or context, it can be very, very challenging.
The challenge for the GM in a traditional like a D&D or a Pathfinder is you got to figure out all those details, but you don't even know if the players are interested in those details yet.
Yeah.
So in this, the fact that there's this narrative control, the players are throwing those details in, you know, because I was kind of listening as you guys were talking through the dreams and the milestones that you wanted, and trying to figure out what were maybe the linkages, or, you know, not even that. You have a goal, but there's 5 different ways to get to the goal. Is it going to be a combat way? Is it going to be an investigation way? Is it going to be, we're going to design something to solve this? You know, there's so many different ways, and it's like, in listening to the players come up with that, you can kind of lean into which solution do they want, and can throw challenges in the way that are in that path versus, you know, if you wanted to go investigate, throwing a big combat thing in the middle of that wouldn't be interesting to the players, or they wouldn't maybe grab onto that as well. So, yeah, the process just, I think, creates the buy-in. Maybe that's what I'm trying to get at.
How did you feel as, you know, quote unquote running the game, right? Like you didn't come in with anything other than the setting, right? Labyrinth. You know, did you feel less involved? Did you feel less invested in what was happening because you weren't either creating it or guiding it in as explicit of a fashion as you normally do?
Well, I think, no, I wouldn't say that I felt less involved. I think the challenge is, you know, I always say the game master should be neutral, or should not be really on the side of the players or the adversaries. It's just kind of like facilitating, this is what's happening. But I think for me, and maybe a lot of people would laugh, that I feel like I'm on the side of the players usually.
True. Yeah.
That I want to see them succeed. I want to see them go through some harsh stuff and some challenging stuff to get there. But, you know, with this, it's kind of like, I need to stay out of it, and I just need to guide what they want to do. I think that's challenging for the game master, is being hands off, but it's not a boredom thing. It's not a apathy thing. It's more like, okay, just listening deeper a little bit to what everyone wants.
Yeah. Do you so, you know, with this system being so different than Pathfinder or 5e or anything D&D, what is it about it, do you think that works? Because really, when I think about it, the pacing shouldn't work, right? We shouldn't be able to have something that's still enjoyable and still hit beats appropriately. You know, if you think about the 4 characters that we had, there was almost no connection besides what Paul put together for the senior citizen help program from Lucas. How is it that it can still kind of coalesce?
I think a big part of what makes it work is you do have this guide. You're being challenged to throw in ideas, add things to the world, but then it isn't just that you throw an idea in there. At some point, I'm going to come in and ask you a question about that idea. Okay, if that's true, what is the thing that could challenge this? So there's always going to be conflict.
Yeah.
And you're designing the conflict based on maybe what's thematic, what would be funny, whatever's enjoyable. Like, you get to choose the genre, the tone, the theme. Having somebody around that is totally neutral and is just kind of pushing you to make your idea better.
Yeah.
And maybe poking holes in it a little bit, and then you're challenged to, you got to fill in the hole.
Yeah.
The people that are involved in the scenario that's being presented, they can invent the best conflict for it because they are thinking about the character that they're playing, so they know what maybe would be the scariest thing or the thing that would frustrate their character the most.
Yeah. And I think to your point earlier, it allows the characters to keep doing what they want, or allows the players, I should say, allows the players to keep doing what they want to do, rather than trying to get to this specific encounter or this specific room that you had spent, the past week crafting, and you want to make sure people get to it, so we're going to skip over this stuff and really get you there.
Right.
You can really focus on the things that you want to focus on at that given moment, and then as soon as it changes, you're good to change and move.
So what you had just described was basically the whole experience of being railroaded, right?
Yeah.
And there are games out there, particularly, I'm thinking of like the Telltale, the video games.
Yes.
That give you
Walking
player
Dead
choice.
And, yeah.
But sometimes it's a false choice because once you've become awake to the fact that those are false choices and you're just going to arrive at the same... Is there something... What do you think? Do you think that that cheapens the experience when a designer gives you the illusion of choice, but then you realize it had no impact? There was no consequence.
I think it totally can. I think that I'm probably one who doesn't care as much, maybe, just because I know that I'm a simple person and I know that I enjoy spectacle, right? So as long as you're kind of giving me some flashy lights and some sparkle, I'm probably along for the ride. But where I think I struggle the most is when you give me like 3 choices, but I want 7, right? Like you're giving me black and white. I want some gray area to inject additional drama, I guess. I don't like the full-on dichotomy of good versus evil or the right choice versus the wrong choice. In a lot of those Telltale games, it feels very much like good, neutral, bad, and that's it.
Yeah,
and
there's
you
no
don't
shades of gray.
Right? Yeah, or they give you like that little snippet of like what you assume they're gonna say, and then they like take it way off the rails. It's like, no, I didn't mean to be that much of a jerk, or whatever.
I don't know what games you probably would be able to say, but my favorite was always the games that would have 3 basically identical answers, like yes, hell yes. Silence.
Just
silence.
dot. Yeah.
Silent acceptance.
I know that. Yeah. So like, if you think about the Mass Effect games, right? So
yeah,
like,
maybe that's what I'm kind of
like,
thinking.
As your Commander Shepard, right? And it really peaks in Mass Effect 2, but they talk about this diamond structure, right? So in Mass Effect 1, everybody's starting from the same point.
Okay.
But you got to get everybody to the same endpoint too. So you get through Mass Effect 1 and everybody's kind of in different spots.
You just have different middles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then Mass Effect 2, it goes even further. And then everybody has to come back like this at a very accelerated rate. So I think especially in Mass Effect 3, those false options that you're talking about really come to the forefront. And that's when it's like, I just spent 80 hours building this character and building these relationships, and now they seem to don't matter. Like you're ending them within 2 or 3 minutes or less in some instances, with a throwaway line, and then you're moving on to the next thing because you're railroading me into this specific spot. I think that can get frustrating when you're putting that time investment in.
Games like Mass Effect, they try.
Yeah.
But I think in a video game, there's only so much you can do, at least at this point. At some point, if you're going to have a narrative story, even if you have a million choices and you have 25 different outcomes or endings, 30 endings, it's still limited.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing about tabletop role-playing games that's so enticing, and I don't think they're going to go away ever, maybe, because it's all creative imagination and limitless choice. Now, that's the thing I think that makes Dreamchaser a little bit unique, is that all of the power really is more in the hands of the players versus the game master. And when I read through like the DM guide for D&D, it's a lot about empowering the DM, that you don't necessarily need to adhere to the rules. You can, and a lot of things are oftentimes hidden.
Yeah.
The players don't always have the knowledge of stats. And there's a reason and a design reason for that.
Sure.
In Dreamchaser, everything is transparent. You know everything because you're designing things. Even when we had the one challenge that came up, I told you exactly what the stats were.
Yep.
Like, you know exactly where this challenge is at this moment in time, so that you could maybe target how you needed to go about dealing with it.
Right.
And you knew what its strengths were.
Yep.
Maybe
it took a little while to really connect what it meant.
That. Yeah.
But I think now that we've seen what that means, I think that's just going to help next time.
I remember I was going to say this earlier when we were talking about games.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the earliest moment that in like your life that you were playing a game and realized like you really wanted more out of the choices that you could have? I have a very specific moment for myself.
Okay.
Playing, I think it was Final Fantasy IV. That was probably the first role-playing game, computer console role-playing game I ever played. Yeah. And early on in the game, basically, you're playing this character named Cecil, or Cecil, depending on which way you go on that.
Titus or Titus.
Yeah. And you get asked to deliver this package that's essentially a bomb.
Okay.
But you don't know that when deliver this package.
Yeah.
And you have to go to this town, and the idea is that the evil king that you were working for was going to blow up this town. And as soon as you get there, that's when that event triggers.
Okay.
And this thing that he gives you is a physical item in your inventory. And as a kid, I was probably 10 years old.
Sure.
Every time I played through that part, I was like, no, these poor people, I didn't want to kill them. So I kept resetting the game and trying to figure out there's got to be a way to get rid of this item. There was this area where you could go to like trade things to this big fat chocobo.
Okay.
I tried everything to get him to take it. I tried to drop it. I tried to like remove the character from the party because he had 2 characters in the party. Everything. Wow. I remember being so frustrated that there was no way around this outcome. And of course, the whole game has a great story, but that first choice, I didn't want to make that choice.
Yeah.
I wanted the what if of something different.
Something else. Do you think part of that for the Final Fantasy example is because there is some of that illusion of choice that like kind of hooks you a little bit, but then it really disappoints you then when you can't do that one thing you wanted to do?
Right. Yeah, the aspect of having it as an item almost made it seem to me as a kid, that it was a choice. It was something that I could move around in my inventory. I've had it.
Yeah.
Why didn't it operate under the same rules as other items that I could drop?
Sure. If you think about like an open world game, like a Fallout, right? First time I played Fallout 3, which was my first Fallout, and I know you played 1 and 2 before that. For me, when I got into Fallout 3 the first time, I bounced off of it because there was too much, right? It's almost like when I pull open Netflix on a Sunday, I'm like, I don't...
Just tell me.
I just start scrolling through stuff and I don't pick anything because I'm paralyzed by choice.
Yeah.
And with Fallout, I was running into that as well. And that's why I think I was a little hesitant at the start of this because it's even more open-ended.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good segue because we talked about that a little bit last night when we finished playing. We had one player that is very much used to heavy mechanics, that crunchy, we joke sometimes, we call it not Pathfinder, but Mathfinder, because there's a stat and there's a rule for anything that you can think of. Somebody's created a process or a mechanic that tells you whether that thing that you want to do works or doesn't work.
It spreadsheets the game.
Yeah. So So if you're coming from that context where there is an answer to any question that you can come up with, to going to, you know, this book is really what? It's about little over 100 pages with glossary and things like that.
And smaller, like it's not full 8.5 by 11 size. It's a smaller book.
Yeah. And I guess as an aside, a lot of the pages in this book are art. Beautiful art.
Absolutely.
If you get a chance to take a look at the actual Dreamchaser book, they won an award for the design and everything.
Even the construction of it,
it
just feels good.
It feels good, yeah. Absolutely. But, this is probably not a book the player is going to have. It's probably going to be the guide that owns this. So if you're sitting around this table, coming from that context of heavy rules and not having a reference, there's definitely a lot of anxiety and limitless freedom. So what do you think? Is there, for you, is there a point where you can have too much freedom in a game, where it makes it not enjoyable?
I think so, but I think at that point it wouldn't be a game anymore. I think it would be more like if it was basically we sat down and whoever the guide was said, okay, who are you? Just super open-ended, who are you?
Right.
I think a lot of people, myself included, would kind of freeze up and not know really where to go with that. I'm a mechanic.
Right.
And you'd kind of just start grasping at things. But by saying, okay, first let's think about this dream and what are we trying to achieve, and going through each of those steps, I think that helped. But if it were just who are you, I would be much more anxious, because then it feels almost like you're being judged on your imagination, right? Or your creativity, or what you can come up with. Oh, that's not funny enough. Yeah. Without any kinds of context, I think that could be a lot more difficult. So I think there has to be at least some amount of structure, or at least some amount of framing where you want me to apply my thought into a system. And I think I'm probably someone who leans further on the spectrum of I want a little bit more structure. And it seems like almost you would be leaning more towards unstructured.
Yeah. I guess that's the thing that I liked about this is I like limitless. I think one of my values as a person is I like freedom.
Yeah.
And I get frustrated by schedules. I get frustrated by, just we have to do it this way. Even with this game, I almost, and I'm glad I didn't do it, but I almost messed with the process that this game sets up for. The step one is create the dream.
Yeah.
There was a piece of me that wanted to start with creating the characters, because that's where you start usually with a role-playing game, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so I thought, for some of our players, maybe that would have been the logical place. But I'm glad I didn't do that. I'm glad we started with the dream, because then you conceptualize your character in the context of that dream. But yeah, that's the tinkerer in me is a natural. I look at what they have. That's how is it supposed to go? Let's see.
We don't need the rules.
Before having ever tried it before, that would have been a terrible idea. So, but yeah, that's I think the strength, like you say, is you could have limitless freedom.
Yeah.
And just be asked, who are you? Who is your character? Without the process, that might be too unwieldy. But because of the facilitation process laid out in this game, it's very, I don't know, there's something refined about it, or charming about the way that it works.
Yeah. I think one of the things that through later on in the game last night that I was really starting to get and really enjoy was that the challenges, we didn't necessarily have to figure out a puzzle, right? So there's that the sliding thing that we invented.
I could
and
tell
then solve.
At some point,
right?
There was an expectation. I could tell they fell into the D&D mindset. Alex has a puzzle.
What's the solution?
I have no notes here. There's no puzzle.
But it could be as simple as Saul saying, "All right, I'm going to solve this.
Yeah.
Like, just through math, because I'm good at math.
Yep.
And I'm going to deduce this through card tricks, and I'm going to figure out the solution. And then it's like, okay, did you solve it or not? Without Paul, as the player, having to be, like, analytical enough to solve that puzzle.
And for me, isn't it more interesting? You know, there's a time and place maybe for a logic puzzle.
Absolutely.
Because it's enjoyable for you to do it. But in the context of a story, does it matter?
No.
Does it tell a story? What he did was, he didn't solve the puzzle. He explained why it makes sense for his character to do so using math and binary.
Yeah.
That he was going to figure everything out into ones and zeros.
Yep.
And he was going to find this pattern and it would solve everything.
With the note-taking kid and like I think that was a watershed moment for me, because I was able to see how we can just get through stuff and get onto the next story beat without being just hung up for 30 minutes and be like, okay, well, I'm at 20, so I'm going to need some healing before I go in and try again, and like, oh, now he's down. Okay, we got to, without having to go through all of that.
Yeah, because really, what is that other than bookkeeping and boredom, right?
Yeah.
So,
and it's a very different thing.
Yeah. I think some people enjoy it. I
Absolutely.
That's always the part, though, in those games that I hate.
Okay.
And as a DM, I usually don't have to preside over that.
Right.
So it's like, usually I say, you guys deal with this. I'm going to go take my break for myself.
Right.
Because this doesn't involve me.
Yeah.
It's not narratively interesting. The great thing about this game is if you got to a point where you were bored, we can move past it. We can move on to the next. What's the next most interesting thing that we can encounter?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's a great system for facilitating that player buy-in and design over the world. What is it that you want to do?
Yeah.
You don't get asked that question all that often.
No. How did you feel the setting? So the labyrinth was kind of the only thing that we brought in coming into it. Did you feel that setting matched up well with the rule set?
I think absolutely, because to me, I don't know. I guess maybe I have thought about the labyrinth too much in designing labyrinthine things.
Right.
But to me, in the movie The Labyrinth, everything that Sarah's, the character Sarah, encountered was in her bedroom.
Yeah.
So to me, the labyrinth represents endless possibility. You could find anything. You could find Barbara Streisand trying to get Skittles out of a vending machine. I think that's totally reasonable thing to happen in the labyrinth.
Yep.
Although she'd probably be a Muppet. But other than that, yeah, totally reasonable.
Absolutely.
And that's what I was kind of thinking before we, instead of giving it a narrative, let's just make it that you could turn a corner and there'd be some crazy scene that's influenced by who your character is.
Yeah.
What else did we have? We had the David Bowie cosplay. Dave, the band, the lead man in the Goblin Kings.
Goblin King Rises. Yeah,
Goblin King Rises. Yeah.
I thought it was really cool. I think, at least for me, when we were getting to like the third and fourth challenge, I was about at that point where I was ready to get out of a tunnel. Right, or get out of okay, we've got walls and we're just going through walls. But at that point, when my Otis had his accident,
yeah,
and had all that happening, I had realized that we can get out of it whenever we want, right? And then we turn the corner and there was Barbara and the vending machine, right? And that's exactly what we needed at that point in time, and we were able to get there. So I thought that was really cool. And I think that, the labyrinth, just to your point, it could go on as long as you needed it to. There's just so many different areas that get hinted at in the fiction that could be so much bigger, right? You've got this whole town at the center. You've got the castle. You've got the sewers.
There's a swamp. There's a forest.
Yeah.
There's
wherever Ludo's from, where's his family?
Yeah. Well, enjoyed talking about all of this, and now I think we're just about at the point we're going to bring up Dreamchaser Pete on with us.
Sure. So the big thing is that you were kind of talking about this a little bit ago, is that it's got this goal-oriented nature that's mechanically tied into the game. So most games start with a setting, right? They're like, hey, check out Numenera. It's kind of like Dune or sci-fi D&D, like 1,000 years from now or something. Or Deadlands, like it's the Weird West. We all kind of know what the Wild West is, but it's like this weird one with mad scientists and like, some supernatural elements. But a lot of times, like, what's the first thing a GM does? The first thing a GM does after the players make their characters is has to tie them together to some mutual goal. And that's the game, right? Is that in some games are explicit, like Shadowrun, where it's like it literally says this is a mission-based game. But it's kind of the core element of every game, right? And we have games, most games tell you like, here's a setting, make great characters, do adventure stuff. And then some games like Fate will say, make great characters and the adventure will come. But Dreamchaser said, hey, the most precise way to get it all going organically is what do we want to play? Like, what is it about? What are we after? So in short, Dreamchaser basically helps players find out what they're into so that we can build a story around it. It's like this little game that can. So,
So then
some people say choose your own adventure. But yeah, it's a goal-oriented game that builds a cool cinematic story around whatever it is you're into. Which is nice because it adapts to your group.
Yeah, and by with this game, when you were coming out to say, okay, I want to put this together, how did you determine the number of mechanics, right? Because you have your milestones, you have your tags, you have your strategies, and it feels like, granted, it was our first time playing last night. We played for about 4 hours, but it feels like it's the right balance of mechanics versus open-endedness. How did you determine what was enough and when to stop adding things?
Sure. Easy answer is playtesting. The long answer is that, it's when it first started, I was comparing it to more other indie story games. And then some of the mechanics I was taking was just, like a little bit from all these great games that came out in the last 15 years and kind of put them in one package. And one of the things that we see in the sort of indie game community is that like we have this really hardcore base that like loves these games. But most people, probably like 80% of the role-playing game community, played D&D and Pathfinder. So it was kind of like, how do I get more people to the cool experiences that I have or I enjoy in role-playing after playing for years and years and getting to this point where like the story is what matters, the characters what matters, getting the cool experiences. I'm no longer interested in just like throwing the dice and seeing pass-fail stuff. So I think largely that's where it came from, was just like trying to make this sort of transitional game, this game that had the balance, that it had enough for the story game community, the narrative community that just kind of wants a little bit to tell the story, and the more conventional, traditional gameplay people who want strength, dex, intelligence, constitution, and want like these skills and weapons that do this damage. So it's kind of a delicate balance that I kept fine-tuning. It leads a little more towards the story side for other visionary goals, but.
So obviously you're traveling around. I met you at Origins. I saw you at Gen Con, and you're playing this game with people. Probably a lot of folks that are playing. They're from a D&D or a Pathfinder. That's like their normal or their game that they are playing weekly, and then they try out your game and they experience this new thing. What are they saying to you? What is it that they are? What element of Dreamchaser are they really grabbing onto and finding that they're falling in love with?
So, the first part is that usually it makes the games that nobody knew they wanted to play.
Yeah.
Because, when you go to make a game, right, we were talking about how everything's sold on settings. So settings usually have some kind of trope, like, cool, we're going to be like thieves in a dark city where everyone's out to get you, or we're going to be like, in this cyberpunk genre where everyone's got chips in their head. So what's neat with the Dreamchaser is that people spitball these dreams like in short sentences, and you get something like one of my favorite stories is "Eat the McRib Again," and everyone just starts cracking up laughing. And you do this guide, like Alex, you mentioned this earlier, like you just kind of like sit back, and you kind of laugh with them, and you're like, okay, well, I don't know if there's any meat to that, and then they start talking, and then they vote it in, and then before you know it, when you say, well, what roles do you want to play? In that game in particular, like one guy was like, I'm the ancient recipe maker's apprentice, and McDonald's got it wrong. And I've come from, and he had all these like illusions of being like some kind of Japanese blacksmith. It was like, I've been training my whole life on recipes with my culinary master, and I've come to America to tell McDonald's that they've got it wrong, and we need to perfect the McRib. One guy was like, the mid-level manager who runs a McDonald's that used to have this past as like one of the highest up in McDonald's security. McDonald's had this black force. There was like the black outfits were for the people who had security training of the highest level. And then there was this guy who was like this computer programmer who every day sat in front, was there the first customer and was like 14 days to the McRib, 13 days to the McRib. But they made this amazing story that followed down this conspiracy that McDonald's was trying to like basically F up the McRib publicly so they could replace it with the McWally, because they had all kinds of control issues of how they could like, actually there's an abundance of whale and dolphin meat that the United States has a stigma against. So if they could replace it, it would be this huge boon. And they just had to make the McRib tank so much that anything they replaced it with would be like the greatest thing ever. And like, you know, there was like a hamburger maze and some conspiracy and some research labs of McDonald's that they were trying to hunt down. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And I walked in with nothing. You know, I just sat down, put the box out, handed out some index cards, and the one that made them laugh is where they told, you know, they created that. And that was, you know, it makes these epic little stories out of stuff that nobody even knew they wanted. So nobody makes those games, right? There's no eat the McRib again, make the perfect sandwich, eliminate my split personality, and on and on and on.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So when you...
So maybe it's your fun faster. You know, it's kind of one of the things a lot of people say. So they're like, wow, I can't believe we told like this huge story. Sometimes with like crazy story beats in like a con setting. They'll be like, usually we do like 1/10 of that. And I feel like I had a whole campaign.
Right. Yeah, that's what we were kind of talking about earlier, is you get to skip once things get boring. Let's just move on to the next thing, you know? We don't have to sit and toil and be stuck in this puzzle for 45 minutes, you know, that none of us are invested in. You just move past the puzzle.
One of the things I'm really happy about is the belief system. That's like one of the number one things I had in mind when I put it in there was, one, nothing sucks worse than having like this redemption story. Let's say like the story starts and you're that cop who like the bad guys finally found your home, they murdered your family, and then like the whole story is like this sort of like coming back, building yourself up again, getting revenge, and then you get to that scene where you got that guy cornered and you just fumble and roll like crap that whole meeting, and it's the worst meeting, and you're like, guys, this isn't even a good story. Like we played for 6 sessions to get to this point.
Yeah.
It's my epic moment with the story, and like usually what happens, and Alex, you could probably relate, is like, is the GM, you want them to succeed. So you're like fudging rolls. You're trying to explain why they would kill you over and over again. And everyone at the table knows what's going on. So the beauty is, I like what the belief is that sometimes, one, it can fix those situations that matter to the players, because it's their story too. That's the big emphasis of the game. It's our story. And the other part is what you were saying. Like they have like a fast forward button. When things suck as a player, you can be like, I'm going to buy it. I'm going to buy it. I'm going to buy it. And we're done, you know? Because there's times where I've seen too many games, especially in like a traditional fantasy, where like we save the princess gets kidnapped session 1, and then we're on session 45, and we still have no idea where she is.
Yeah.
Because the GM is like, oh, that's just this epic, perfect session one day that'll happen that's like up here, and they're never happy with the amount of prep they've done. So it's like filler and side quests for like weeks. And this is your way as the player being like, all right, fast forward. Fix the pacing. Let's go.
Yeah.
Not interested, you know?
So we've got some questions rolling in. So maybe we'll throw an audience question in here real quick. Monitor Wizard asks,
My man.
the game is meant to be very collaborative, but my group has a few power gamers. When you're running the game, how do you deal with someone trying to min-max their character? For example, taking overly broad tags that can be used in almost every situation. That's a good question.
That's a good question. In the book, you'll find one of the things it mentions is that a lot of times when things are too broad, you just ask them to basically add a word. You know, if they say, I'm gifted, because then you can be gifted about everything, right? Like I have dumb luck. I'm a natural. I have instincts or something. These are reflexive. Like maybe they can find a way to use them all the time. The two things you do, the one part is you go, okay, well, are you physically gifted? Are you gifted with your hands? Like, just challenge them to add another word. And even if it's like 3 sessions in, like everyone knows. Like everyone's looking at each other like, God, he's always using that thing. The other thing is in the GM section, it even talks a little bit about, you know, if you as a player, as a character, right, like keep working up that you're bashful, and you make bashful work for everything. well, then you're probably going to eventually see some of the consequences of being bashful, right? So there is parts in the GM section that says, there's nothing stopping you, guide, if you find that the player just keeps using something, start framing things in a way that hold it against them so they can't, or even using it as a negative tag once or twice. If the situation really demands it, you're like, dude, bashful is the worst thing you could be right now. But I feel like you got to be really careful with what you do with that. But that's about like, right, if someone's just hammering it home, that kind of person in real life would have some problems too because of it.
Yeah.
How much do you inject yourself if you've got one player, let's say they are, they're that power gamer, but they're also like taking over the session? Is there anything that you employ to try and allow everybody to feel like they have a voice and a place at the table? Or is that something that usually works itself out?
So usually most of the mechanics, like challenges and stuff, a lot of things are vision rules. They keep enforcing like we go clockwise. So usually there's a constant pattern of telling you in a way. I feel like sometimes if you don't tell them like how you write the book, how you instruct people to play or run the game, then they won't do it. So there's got to be some teeth to things, and a lot of things. Sometimes Dreamchaser almost too much. Make sure that everyone has a turn. There can be times in a challenge that I feel like sometimes you were really trying to make sure everyone gets a turn. That sometimes they don't all need a turn, but it does try to do that because it wants everyone to have their fair share of spotlight.
Yeah.
But yeah, as a GM, right, you also have some good instincts of like, hey, we've been talking to this one guy for 5 minutes. It might be time to check in with somebody else.
Curious what some of the games that influenced. You kind of mentioned that maybe you'd looked at some other games.
For sure.
There's other kind of story or narrative building games out there.
Mm-hmm.
Are there a couple that really influenced you when you were thinking about Dreamchaser?
And then obviously Fate. If Fate didn't exist, also Dreamchaser probably couldn't, because Dreamchaser goes kind of like a further step, and sometimes you need those games to kind of open the door so you can jump through it. So Fate said, "Hey, characters are the most important thing," and then Dreamchaser said, "Characters are the most important thing, except for the goal." So it gives you all that character love, but like with a straight shot at the goal. Because Fiasco, I think, for example, is a game that like it's hurt. Some of these story games are hurt because the players don't know where they're going. So I think that was a big story game problem that traditional players are like thrown off by. It's like, okay, you want me to have some more directorial control, some more creative control, but I don't know where we're going. And that makes me feel like I'm doing it wrong. And if I'm doing it wrong, I'm not having fun. If I'm not having fun, why are we playing a game? So
Yeah.
Dreamchaser from always, even if the character doesn't know, you as the player always know where we're going. So.
Yeah, I played Fiasco for the first time at Gen Con, and I think it definitely worked because of the people I was with, that we were all that type of. But I think I see what you're saying. There were times in that game where there was a lull because we didn't have that finish line. So
Yeah.
we might have all had different end games kind of in mind, or there was some kind of toil there at times when we were discussing like, where's this story going. But Dreamchaser kind of solves that problem in the very first step with the dream mapping.
Yeah. And I did see a comment before we logged over on Twitch, and it said something like, what can I take from this to like hybrid with my traditional games? And the big part's that dream map. There's nothing about that dream map that like makes it, system. What I'm trying to say, it's system agnostic. It doesn't care what system you're playing. You could, with a handful of index cards, hand them out to your players, like you did last night. Say, hey, we're going to tell a story in the labyrinth, like David Bowie Labyrinth, and what would you like to do if you could do anything in that setting? And then give them a couple examples, right? And then like when they pick, go to roles, do the mapping of however many sessions you think you might, whatever your play frequency is. Is each one of these milestones a session? That's the easiest way to do it. Because you have like no prep practically, right? The goal is for every session. It's the easiest way to get a new or even a GM that just wants the easiest prep, right? Each one is one session. Yeah. So you vision roll beforehand. You know what the problems are if you want to prep anything. You walk into the next session with some input from your players. We all know what the goal is. We have one thing to accomplish. We could do that in 90 minutes or 4 hours, depending on how long we like to play. So.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but this would be a great session 0 exercise that could be adopted
And the dream having, like, there's so many GMs that are like, dude, I'm the only one who runs D&D every Sunday night, and it's been like 4 years, and I'm so burnt out, and everyone's on their phones, and I don't know what they're doing, and they all seem to be having fun, and they're like, oh, you got to run, and I'm like, I don't even know what they want.
Yeah.
So it is challenging sometimes, right? Because getting people, asking them what they want, people don't always know what they want. But that's a good exercise that I think, I knew that making the game. I knew that, like, we are challenging people a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a good challenge because, like, life's too easy to, like, just sit back and watch these days. And, like, the beauty of role-playing games is we can do whatever we want. It's not like you said, a Telltale game where, like, I'm only going to have 3 choices at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, yeah, it seems like too much of life has become that, like a multiple choice test.
I think it's cool too that it allows the player, like, I see this not only as kind of this blank canvas, but it also allows you to kind of go as complex or as simple as you need to. I don't have to keep track of how many spell slots I have left, or can I actually use this? Can I, like, one thing that we run into a lot of times in Tomb of Annihilation is, can I actually target, like, a wall on this, or do I have to target a creature? Like, just those pieces, I can do what I want to make this an interesting situation instead of having to rely on Alex to know what I can and can't do.
Yeah, and I think that's really freeing for both parties. The game master, is rewarded by being like, I don't need to know all the details of everything.
Yeah,
which can lead to a lot of dread before a game session because you're like, did I do enough? Did I put in the time I needed? Did I make all the stuff I needed? And then when the session's over, you look at all the stuff you didn't use and you go like, what a waste of time sometimes, which I think is, you can always use it later somehow.
Yeah.
But these are things that also make role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games, a difficult hobby sometimes because we're all busy. There's not, most of us are not bored anymore in this day and age. So that's a real opportunity cost that I try to remove as much as possible from Dreamchaser. So, I mean, the GM never rolls dice. So all you are doing as the GM when you were sitting there is you were just worried about players, like engaging players and keeping the story going, which is nice because nothing else matters.
Yeah.
Because as long as you can be engaged, you can keep them engaged. And hopefully the system was designed well enough that everything's like a how question. Everything's a prompt for players to be more descriptive. So it really builds this back and forth constantly, which I think makes better games. There's not like, oh, cool. Well, I'm going to use my sword, D20. It does this much damage. Move on. It's
right.
How are you going to use your sword? And then that's how we determine if it's a magic or reason. Okay, cool. So here's what you roll. Great. That's how you did. What do you think that looks like? Oh, shit. Tag. You have any tags that can help you? Great. Describe more. Okay. Well, then this happened, but you still didn't get it. Do you have any more tags you could use? So it draws the story out of the players. Some players don't need that so much, but what's nice is it does kind of even the table out, right? If you have one person who doesn't need that, but 3 that do, you put them all on the same page, kind of. So
yeah,
I hope.
That's cool.
So maybe kind of switching gears here a little bit. I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about the process of kickstarting your game. What does that process look like? And maybe do you have any advice to aspiring game designers that are going to take that route to get their product funded?
Sure. So let's see. I'll try not to give you all the normal stuff, right? Because there's everyone's kind of had Kickstarter 101 at least a little bit.
Yeah.
Like they've seen the teaser trailer of that class. So obviously Kickstarter is stressful. Obviously it's a lot of work. Some people will tell you it's like making a second game, except for it's in a month. So it's almost like a competition. For sure, get at least one other person to help you. That sounds like a no-brainer, but plenty of people are out there doing it on their own. And even if that second person is nothing but a second person helping with social media.
Oh.
Like you need more than you because you will run into all of the walls of like every Facebook group asks you, please, if you're going to post, do like one ever, like don't spam us. And every designer or person that uses social media for business is worried about overdoing it. So what's nice is you can really kind of juggle those responsibilities, not to mention kind of put 2 posts in different places that'll make you feel more comfortable throughout the process of sharing information. And that just really you just need a partner for that. I didn't have that. And that was the number one thing I left afterwards going, never again in the future. Because there was a lot of benefit beyond just the difficulty, the physical time commitment. There was also a lot of benefit that I wish I would have thought of. And stuff like stretch goals and things, posts, like your updates, you can pretty much plan all those ahead of time. People don't think about that. Like, you probably should like set a month calendar aside and make little notes. Like, well, how many times am I going to try to update these people? Am I a person who's going to do it every other day, every 3 days, or like once a week or twice during the whole thing? What are those going to be about? Because depending on how much messaging I have, what do I have, what's my top to bottom priority list, right? So that's the big thing. You need to have an audience to leverage before you come in. So don't come in with nobody or nothing. You do have to have a product that's interesting or quality, And unfortunately, if you just have a setting with no real twist, a lot of times people are going to be like, hey, I got plenty of games already. So you do kind of need to have something that sparks their interest. And you need a little luck too, because there's timing involved. Timing of what month of the year you put it in. Like summer's usually abysmal. December is pretty much a kiss of death. Early January is bad. November largely is bad unless you're ending. Springtime's generally good, but it's crowded, especially around tax time. Everyone keeps saying, go to tax time, go to tax time. I feel like we've pretty much hit the wall there.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of RPGs that are made by great companies and seem like consistently across the board, they were all at different levels. Like, if you're a new great game, it was like 10 grand. If you're like a company that has a track record of 50,000, you made 25. Yeah. And it was just kind of almost like we took all the dollars of the Kickstarter people
and then divvied it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
you had mentioned
that's a lot of it.
Oh, yeah.
If I could add one more thing, and this is me as a goal-oriented person, is set a date and then make it happen. The best advice I ever had from game design, and I take the Kickstarter, is that perfection is the enemy of done. Like, you could fiddle with something forever, make more games, put more good stuff out there. You'll get better.
So you established your dream first, and then did everything, right? Yeah. You had mentioned stretch goals, so you've got some of those. What do we have to look forward to for the stretch goals?
Oh, you mean for Dreamchaser or for something else?
Yeah.
So Dreamchaser, the stretch goals we had, this kickstarted back in last January 2017 to February 24th-ish. It did really well. Did just under 15,000. We hit a handful of stretch goals. Like people got like free dice, and they got like bookmarks, and they got these slap bands that we had that said "Chase Your Dreams." There was an action-packed PDF, like an example pack, and a otherworldly example pack that went to PDF that are both. Now that you play it, just think about like everything you made, like strategy, tags, belongings, stuff. If you had like a thing you could print out and have like an example pool that was all within a genre, right?
Oh, okay.
Hey, we want to play Hong Kong action theater. Cool. Here's like an example pool of like 100 of each thing. That'll kind of, if we all pick from that or kind of work from there and like build our own, we'll all be kind of in the right wheelhouse.
That's cool.
So basically we've made 4 of those so far. 2 of them were stretch goals. The other 2 were we made Cyberpunk and a romantic comedy most recently. Yeah, which is pretty awesome. Like, there isn't rom-com sort of stuff in the RPG industry. So that was a lot of fun. And then maybe go back and watch a lot of movies.
If you were to recommend to us another tabletop role-playing game that you think more people need to know about, could you tell us, name another product that we should be playing on the stream and what we should get out in the eyes of people? And maybe if you could tell us a little bit about what makes that game special.
So, I mentioned Lady Blackbird, so I'm going to tell you about Monsters and Other Childish Things. It's probably my favorite game. It's the one game I always talk about. Like, I would go buy the IP and work on it, which probably isn't worth doing, because you could kind of build I could call it like, I don't know, creatures and other little kid things. Like you could, what I mean? Like it's when it comes to IP purchase or whatever. But it's a really cool game. I usually say it's kind of like South Park meets Call of Cthulhu. Because you play kids and they have monsters and they have this special bond with monsters, and monsters could be anything from like, the boogeyman in your closet to some like elder god that's a shark, a planetary, like a shark that lives on a world that's all water, to like, you completely can create them, some radioactive insect, some slasher killer. But all we know is the bond between that kid and that monster is like true love. And that monster is like the big brother, big sister, will do whatever. And there's actually a little bit of ties. Like if you emotionally hurt the kid, the monster gets physically hurt. If you physically hurt the kid, like the monster can feel it, but it doesn't. So there's interesting things there. The kid's got all kinds of problems that are like curfew. I can't run fast enough, and all the kids make fun of me in gym class. My mom's drinking too much. I keep missing the bus, and then you have like this sort of like elder god who loves you, who wants to fix your problems, and unfortunately, they don't understand your world and your problems because you have problems like curfew that are just like cultural. Godzilla wants to be like, well, I'll just break your school then, right? Just smash, and then and you're like, no, Godzilla, I needed that school. Now I'm gonna get grounded. So they're like unimaginably powerful. And usually what happens is players play like a kid and a monster, and then they can kind of balance the two, and the GM hijacks their monster occasionally to like add in the bad stuff. But you can make characters in like 5 minutes. If you make monsters, it'll probably take you like 15 minutes because it's real creative and fun. Like you have the space to draw them if you want. And you like build them up by a number of dice that you want to put in different body parts because, they could be anything. Like I've had people who made monsters, like we have an intergalactic space slug that's a cook, like a chef. So he pulls his chef's hat and you pull any cooking appliance out from underneath. He opens his chef's coat and has all the knives he'll ever need for like attacking and stuff. He can have like X-ray vision to like basically look at the choice meats in people's bodies. He can walk up walls. So there's a lot of fun stuff that you can make too. And the kids are great because like you can whip them up in like 5 minutes and they're really cool. So I love it in the way that it's this fun little game that is really interesting and exciting, and has a good system too. It's made by Art Dream Publishing. It's probably, I don't know, maybe 8 years old.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that definitely sounds interesting. So we'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
What's kind of nice is like you, of course, are going to kind of maybe have a little bit of an idea what you want, but it'd be another great game you could dream map, or a game that a lot of times people just kind of sit down and play, and then the GM just kind of uses the monsters to like eventually cause problems, and then the players have to fix those problems because the monsters don't know any better.
Yeah.
So.
All right, we've got another question for Pete coming in from the chat. What's next for Dreamchaser, and what's next for Imagining Games?
Yeah.
Cool. So for Dreamchaser, we're working on the Hong Kong Action Theater pack. So it's kind of like the martial arts theme pack. So I have the I was going to say script, but it's not a movie. Right? I have like the manuscript, right? So we just redid it, and then I'm going to. One of the cool things, I do all the layout for the example packs. It's like a way for me to keep growing because I haven't had any formal training, so I just keep getting better. And then we make these, and they're usually like 20 pages or something. They're not crazy long. They come with like a handful of sample challenges, a couple like sort of world tags, we call them. Like in romantic comedy, maybe this is like a teen party sort of game. So maybe we could have this pool of tags that talks about that maybe is overarching all the players. Like it's not just your tags, but hey, because we're playing teen party and rom-com, here's 5 tags that attach to this game, right? Mm-hmm. So you could pull from those. Or like, I think there's Bride Wars or something, stuff that's kind of in that trope. So Hong Kong Action Theaters come in, it'll probably be the fall. And then I'm working on the next game. It's called Rest in Pieces. And that's, I got a little bit of monsters and other childish things inspired into it. But basically you play like, kind of like millennials. You play like roommates who are probably losers, and they live with the Grim Reaper. So the Grim Reaper inevitably has the problem that the only way he can fix your problems is by killing people. And you play this short, it's a one-shot game. It's meant to play in 2 hours. It's got a Jenga tower that will fall twice in the game. One time leads us to Act 2, and the second time ends the game. So it's meant to play paced by the tower. Basically, it's a game about difficult friendships and bad days. Because like you live in a world where everything just sucks. So you have to pull from the tower a number of pieces to basically make your day better. But by doing so, you get closer and closer to like leading to the inevitable like sort of killing spree of death, depending on who has been causing the problems. So that's a really fun, cute game that I'm working on a card version of the game that may end up being like card deck. that has like a card maybe like part of the deck that you could kind of replace with different settings. Like maybe you're like in a dorm or a campground or like an alley or like a city or a small town or farm USA, because like you share a pad with death, but we didn't say where, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's fun that like, and there even has the playability that you might be able to replace who death is. Like there might be like kid death, or there might be like, the quiet stalking, like, lived forever Grim Reaper, or maybe like we could have Sharon the boat keeper. And like anytime Sharon kills someone, we just cut to the scene where Sharon's boating some guy across to hell. Like so the cards in the Jenga Tower are all about making games as accessible as possible. You saw it, the character sheet. Dreamchaser tries to make a game that's really approachable. There's no homework involved. You get a character sheet. You don't have to open the book. You don't have to read anything if you're a player. So it's about like, how can I make that how can I even get more people into the hobby? Well, a Jenga tower instead of dice means that like we just need the one tower. Mine has multiple colors blocks, which is one of the interesting things that changes it up. And the cards people see cards and they think we can play this right now. Mm-hmm. We can do this right now. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a game that we really could just be like, cool, I want to play this neat little RPG about like bad days and difficult friendships. Cool, we go in the hallway at Gen Con and play it right now.
Yeah.
So.
That's awesome.
Well, as you're talking about that Grim Reaper character, it makes me want to personify him like Terry Pratchett's death. I'm so misunderstood.
Yeah, right now the party, each person gets to say something about the Grim Reaper to kind of like make it more ours.
Oh,
like
yeah.
We've had versions that were like, he lived on Subway sandwiches because one of the characters was a sandwich artist. So, every character has like a dead-end job, an odd hobby, and a deadly object. And they kind of work like strategies, except for the number of blocks you can touch on the tower.
Okay.
Because like the big thing that screws Dread in like games like Jenga is people just touch every block to find the good ones, and it takes forever. Mm-hmm. So now it's like always tension of like, oh, I can only touch 5 blocks. And if I want a good result, I might have to pull 3 out of those 5 touches. Oh my God. So it gets kind of fun and crazy.
Well, I want to be mindful and respectful of your time. I want to thank you big time for joining us this morning, Pete, to talk about Dreamchaser RPG. And thank you all, everyone hanging out in the chat, asking questions. And it seems like we got a lot of people from last night that came back to hear
That's
more
awesome.
about Dreamchaser. So if y'all are interested in purchasing Dreamchaser, we have a link to it down in the products we're using panel. Or you can head on over to Imagining Games, so 2 words, imagininggames.com, and check out the shop. And you can purchase Dreamchaser, any of the associated products that Pete mentioned. I'm definitely going to have to check out some of those, like the rom-com. That could be kind of fun. It sounds like
really
great tools.
Oh, yeah.
I think a Twitch stream of rom-com could be a real riot.
Yeah.
And people would see like, holy cow, that is great. Because I think a lot of people, well, if your group's all guys, right, I can understand why you might be, or all girls, you might be like, I don't know if I want rom-com, but if you had a mixed group, I think you'd be more excited about it.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, I think that could be a lot of fun. And it could be a way to engage some people who have never played a role-playing game before.
Yeah, for real. That's what I was thinking, too.
And we could finally get You've Got Mail 2 that everybody's been waiting
for.
I mean, we need Tom Hanks back in New York City. I
didn't see where you're going with that at first. That's hilarious.
Man,
yeah.
It's so good.
Sequels.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to be it for us. Thanks again for watching. We'll try to do this. This was the first of many. So, Pete, thanks for being our guinea pig.
Yeah, thank you, Pete.
We're going to try to do this once a month.
It was a great stream last night.
Oh, good.
I appreciate you running it. I hope you had fun. It looked like it was a blast. So, thank you.
It was awesome.
So anybody out there that's watching, if you have an up-and-coming game that you want to see us play and talk about, you can shoot us an email at 20sideseverystory@gmail.com, or you can tweet at me at _awesomeness. All right. Thanks, all. We will see y'all soon.
See ya.
Thanks. Bye.